And then I'll ask for approval of the minutes of the March 8th, 2022 meeting. Anyone have any questions, changes, deletions to those minutes? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Yeah. Yay.
Aye.
I think we have to vote. Hey, there's David. Next item is the financials, and I'll turn that over to our favorite treasurer. Eugenia?
Yes. For the year-to-date period ending March 31st, Norwalk Fund 400 had 13,000 in revenue and 11,000 in expenditures, which resulted in a net operating surplus of $2,000. And the balance sheet for this fund had assets of $422,000 and liabilities and net assets of $422,000. The Norwalk Revolving Loan Fund had $2,000 of a net operating surplus, which is interest income from notes. And then the balance sheet for this fund has $139,000 in assets and $139,000 in liabilities and net assets.
Okay. Any questions? Observations? Seeing none, I'll call for the approval of the Norwalk Housing Corporation Quarterly Statement of Revenues and Expenditures. All in favor? David?
Aye.
Mary? Kelly? I think we have it. Any other business or new business, old business that we want to bring forth on Norwalk? Being none, I'll call for an adjournment. All in favor of adjourning? Unanimously voted to adjourn. Now return to the next meeting. Nope, just lost the minutes. Norwalk Redevelopment Agency. Call the meeting to order. We have here David, Kelly, Mary, and myself. Anyone from the public want to participate? Any comments? Brian, anybody out there?
Nope. No one's
All
like
right.
me.
And then I'll go to next, administration, the approval of the minutes of the March 8th regular meeting. Hope everyone's had a chance to read it. And any comments, changes? No? Call for a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes? Unanimous? Carried. Next, we'll look at the financials, and we'll turn it over to Eugenia. We're going to approve the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency Quarterly Statement of Revenues and Expenditures and the balance sheet for the year-to-date March 31st. Eugenia?
Yes, for the 9 months ending March 31st, Operating Fund 100 had actual revenues of $1,053,000 versus a budget of $1,066,000, which resulted in an unfavorable variance of $13,000. This is mainly due to lower CDBG grant revenue, which will be recouped over the remainder of the year. The actual expenditures of $1,064,000 versus a budget of $1,070,000 resulted in a favorable variance of $6,000, which is due to a favorable variance in administrative costs of $26,000, offset by an unfavorable variance in personnel expenses of $20,000. The actual net operating deficit of $11,000 versus a budgeted deficit of $4,000 resulted in an unfavorable variance of $7,000. We go to the balance sheet for Fund 100. And as of March 31st, this fund had $4,782,000 in cash, accounts receivable due to other funds and property, and $1,660,000 in loans receivable and other assets. This fund had $718,000 in deferred revenue, which will be earned when expended, and $3,497,000 in net assets. The financial statements of the other funds are also included in this package, but there are no major variances except for the CDBG non-revolving loan fund 300, which had an operating deficit of $133,000, but this has been drawn down and reimbursed.
Okay. Any questions? Observations? None, seeing none, I'll call for approval of the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency quarterly statement of revenues and expenditures. All in favor? Aye. Looks like a unanimous vote. We'll go to item 5, business. This is approve the South Norwalk Station Area Study Final Draft Report submitted by Vanessa Hagen. We've all seen this previously, but I'll turn it over to Brian. Brian?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, you'll recall this was the presentation, the joint presentation we all had with the Economic and Community Development Committee back in March. Our consultants, VHB, provided an overview of the study, its findings, sort of process, and overall recommendations. We had since released that for public review. We received only one public comment, which I wanted to read into record before your consideration, and then we could open up for any questions too that you may have prior to approval. The comment that we received is from Benjamin Handpeter, and he states a number of things. I think some of these are very helpful and thoughtful comments, so I wanted to provide them to you all. He says, I have some comments regarding the final draft of the South Norwalk Station Area Study. Overall, I have a very positive impression of the draft, and I hope to see its recommendations implemented. Regarding the 3 transitway options, I have a strong preference for option 1, west side of the station. It is imperative that the new transitway provides the most seamless experience for transit users to increase public transit's competitiveness versus car travel. Building the transitway on MLK adds additional obstacles for transit users, which would certainly reduce ridership. The additional benefit of option 1 of increasing the city's flexibility to expand bus service in the future is also critical. It is my hope that the city will improve the abysmal frequencies of its bus systems, and making sure that the station can handle that additional frequency is extremely important. The relocation of Leroy Downs and SNU will make option 1 tougher to implement, but the city really ought to take its time and do this right. A well-designed transit hub will be a real jewel in Norwalk's crown, and opportunities to do projects like this do not come around very often. Let's do right by transit users and win some new converts in the process by making the user experience the best it can be. Regarding the housing development options, I have a strong preference for the high density option with the reduced parking ratios. Leveraging our existing mass transit infrastructure to create dense, walkable, and well-connected neighborhoods must be the priority. The land surrounding the transit station is some of the most valuable in the city, and it ought to be developed at a fairly high intensity. I was pleased to see the study include a reduced parking ratio for the higher density option, and I'd really like to see it even lower. I'd like to see the parking spots decoupled from rent such that tenants would pay a monthly fee to have a spot. Maybe this has to be implemented regardless, since the ratio is less than 1. I'm happy to see the study call attention to the desired uses of new retail space planned in the developments. To make a high density development viable, people's basic everyday needs must be provided for within walking distance. As the study mentions, grocery stores, pharmacies, laundromats, and coffee shops are important to have close at hand. A sushi restaurant and a Sephora does not really cut it when creating a livable neighborhood. Not that they don't have their place, but basic needs have to come first. I'm also happy to see the study discuss a road diet on MLK Drive, which I think is sorely needed. The current 2-lane setup encourages speeds that are much too high for the area, which creates additional emissions and noise in the community. The lack of dedicated bike lanes seriously limits the north-south connectivity between Sono and Rowayton. I am very much looking forward to seeing these issues addressed through a road diet, and some traffic calming measures would be welcome too. Finally, I'd like the recommendations for the Webster Street lot redevelopment. The current lot is of such a massive waste of potential, and I am glad to see that I am not the only one who thinks so. It will certainly be a huge upgrade to build additional retail, office, and residential space on the property. My only critique is the plan for a parking garage. I recognize that there must be some parking on the site, but it would be my hope for the overall parking capacity at the site be decreased and be offset with ways to encourage people to come to Sono by alternative means. More frequent and extensive bus service, Protected bike lanes and secure bike parking would be a great start. This also applies for getting people to the station. I recognize the logic that parking rides can decrease total VMT, but that goal should really be to eliminate the car from the equation entirely. The board should absolutely adopt this plan and begin implementing its recommendations as soon as possible. It is encouraging to read plans like this since it sends the signal that the city is serious about becoming more livable, diverse, sustainable, and attractive. Thank you for taking the time to read my comments. That's the end of that.
Thank you for reading it into the record. You sound like you wrote it.
It's not a plan.
All right.
Can those
Uh,
comments be shared?
Yeah, we will all forward them around. Or Katie, if you don't mind, because I know you had the original email.
Okay. Any other observations? If before we do-
I just wanted to ask, I don't know if it's too late to make a comment, but I thought that the general text about affordable housing in general was very good, but I didn't feel like a lot of the items that were discussed made it into the recommendations. What made it in really was about affordable home ownership, not a whole lot about affordable rentals. And given how much I was really happy that they commented that that was such an important comment in multiple public meetings and for the community, I feel like it's an oversight that there's not some recommendations about rentals. I also would just ask if there could be some comment about not being limited to the current status of the 10%. I appreciated the consideration of that there may be other ways to get subsidies. I did see through this legislative session that there is some monies that are starting to be discussed to support affordable housing. I realize some of them are ARPA monies, and so they're short term, but I don't think this is an issue that's going to go away in Connecticut. So to the extent that we can really be creative, as I said, given that they did an excellent job about capturing what an important theme that was, I would hope that that got more emphasized in the recommendations, which people will tend to gravitate towards the end. The other thing is with the high density, I was in that meeting and I remember there was one comment of someone that was kind of making the argument for doing 8 stories to get the high density. I'm not sure, we might end up getting a lot of pushback if we talk about 8 stories, although I do understand the fiscal feasibility that that gives for doing it when you get more density. But I think there needs to be probably more examination of that because I know I'm not saying anything that anybody doesn't already know here, but one of the big comparisons always with Stanford is that we tend to have more lower buildings and people don't necessarily want to look just like Stanford. So I realize I'm sort of speaking out both sides of my mouth. I realize in the sense that higher density does help to do affordability, but I do hope when we talk about affordability, we're not just talking about the current 10% that's for 60% of median income, which is not going to address the issues that got brought up by the community.
Right. I can speak a little bit to it. I understand what you're saying for the first comment regarding the recommendation section, which I think we could probably enhance because the intent is obviously for especially on the western side of the station with the SNU and Leroy Downs is really to use that as an opportunity to play with the land costs because there's publicly controlled assets to make more affordability than the typical 10% work. So I think that we could make an adjustment with VHB before we fully adopt and take your comments in and include that in the recommendation section because the intent is to have a higher level of affordability there. And that was part of the community conversation on that one. And in terms of density, yeah, I think both in terms of the affordable housing and then also the overall density and zoning regulations, we've been going through this plan with the understanding that the city is going to be developing a new affordable housing plan as well as updating the overall zoning. And we actually did do a financial feasibility model of looking at it, at least with today's construction costs and how much the rents could generate. And going higher didn't necessarily get you as much of a benefit as you would think. So I think we're trying to maintain it as close as we can to market reality, recognizing things may change as things go down the road, but really trying to make serious recommendations in that regard based on the feedback we received and feed that into the zoning update. So hopefully that responds a little bit to your comments.
Yeah, and just also, as I said, I really think there's going to be a lot more consideration of money at the state and federal level for affordable housing. And so I think it needs to be mentioned at least as giving a way that we don't have to totally depend on market solutions.
Absolutely. Great. It's very helpful.
What happens next after tonight's meeting?
Well, so this is a study, right? So we have a redevelopment plan that sort of sets a larger foundation. This is more of us just kind of trying to get some new data and get a tactical hand on, the infrastructure that we're trying to build and some of our community objectives that we all agreed upon through this overall planning process. So the plan gets approved, and there's already a number of things going on underway for its implementation. So we have the land disposition agreement that's actually being considered tonight for Common Council. So I'll be at that. It's been approved by the Economic and Community Development Committee for one of the plan recommendations on the eastern side of the tracks, the 200 units along Henry and Chestnut. And then also, that $6 million grant that I had announced, that was all related to this. So we're going to be going through and trying to implement some of the infrastructure recommendations of this whole plan. So not often do you have money to implement a plan straight out of approving it. So this is a good problem to have. The other piece that we'll be working on is with SNU and Housing Authority to try to figure out a receiving site for potentially for the SNU facility. To help, enable that development. And then we're concurrently working on Webster Law, which I'll speak a little bit more about later in the meeting today. These are all coming out of the plan. So we're just trying to hit the ground running on some of those implementation recommendations.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, a couple. So Brian, is this a study that the Common Council will adopt as well, or?
No, I discussed with the city that we presented to Economic and Community Development and have a favorable recommendation for our board to adopt it since we led the plan.
Okay. And one other minor thing that I just didn't catch until now, flipping through on page 45 of the study, it mentions Concord Magnet School and preserving the green space. I think isn't it Columbus School?
Yes.
Columbus Magnet.
Let me catch you.
So yeah, just that.
Thanks for the catch.
And that's it.
Great. Yeah, it was about almost a year and a half of work, and I'm very happy. It was a great way to have a community conversations around these larger issues and sort of have a plan moving forward on how to best develop around the train station with everyone sort of on the same page.
Do we have to actually approve the final draft?
I think for formality, yes, it'd be helpful if we had an approval of it.
Okay.
But since you were going to give some edits, is that then an approval with the understanding that some of those additions will be made?
Yes, I think that's how we could handle it. And I could circle them around to you all before we finalize everything to make sure you're comfortable if that works for you.
Okay. So then we'll approve the South Norwalk Station Area Studies final draft, subject to some changes that we've just discussed. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, unanimous. What's next on the agenda? The work program status update. You gave us.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you all just a brief overview of some of the bigger projects we've been working on and that are on the horizon now that we're wrapping up this study. One of the big ones is the MLK Housing Investment Program. So we have at this point, it's $1.25 million in residential facade improvement money that we're actively moving forward to administer. We've been working on a new draft set of guidelines, working with MLK corridor initiative committees. So we're going to be, actively working to scope those projects and start spending that money. It's been a large effort, but we're at the point now where we're really starting to hit the ground running. We're trying to do an open house for all the MLK corridor initiative with the tentative date of June 22nd. So we're working with the city to kind of schedule that and get that moving. We received another item is we received the $6 million grant from DECD, which is a very welcome gift. That's dependent upon this discussions tonight at the Common Council, bringing together the public-private partnership with Spinnaker at Monroe and Chestnut for the development of 200 units that would unlock this infrastructure assistance money tied for improvements around Monroe, Henry, Chestnut, and Martin Luther King Drive, in addition to various green infrastructure implementations. And if I haven't sent, I'm not sure if I'll forward out the application so you all could see specifically what I think we included it with the announcement, but I'm happy to provide that again. So that's going to keep us busy for a while. Again, tonight, the LDA is being considered by the Common Council, is approved by the Economic Development Committee, the term sheet. So then we're going to go over the next 3 months negotiating a full land disposition agreement and sort of details of the overall deal to make sure it's amenable to all the public parties. And then finally, Webster Street lot. If you recall, we went out for a request for qualifications and we received back 7 proposals. We've narrowed our shortlist down to 3, and they've since been issued a request for proposals to kind of bring together more detailed presentation due on July 18th. So we're going to use the summer to kind of review those, and we'll be able to report back thereafter. So those are the sort of high level projects, but I'm happy to talk about any of them in more detail, or if you have any questions on anything else.
Would I ask a favor? I don't know if it's the practice, but it would be great even if we could get a 1-page summary of these, because Brian, you're holding so much of it in your head and I can't take notes as fast as you talk. So,
Fair enough.
and the other thing I'd really love is I thought it was great that when they got the $6 million grant, I would have loved to have had the opportunity for you to have presented a little bit. Congratulations. It's wonderful you got it, but it would be nice if we could have a little bit more digging deeper of the kinds of things that you're accomplishing. You clearly have a really strong vision, and it would be really nice to understand it a little bit more deeply.
Yeah, no problem. If I can do that at the next meeting, if that's helpful, I could provide a more detailed overview. And we'll actually have more understanding of the details at the state level by then as well. So it's a little fuzzy on that end. So that's why I don't want to put something together on the front end, but happy to do that.
I have a question. Recently in the hour, we heard about the city's litigation plans and the cost, and Jason saying he's not going away. There will be more costs. What is our share of that cost? How is it impacting us?
It depends on which litigation. The first one was covered by insurance, so it's not. And then the other one is covered by the arrangement with the city, so it's not affecting us.
Not affecting us.
Correct.
How much more litigation is going to go on, though?
I think I would probably defer that to our legal team. You know, I don't want to misspeak. I think that'd probably be a better question. We could table that for, when I could bring Bruce or Mario in to talk about that, if that works for you.
Okay. Is there any resolution in sight? Mario to talk about that too?
Yeah, probably. It'd probably be best to handle that with him.
Okay.
Or our legal team.
All right. Next, I thought it'd be everyone might enjoy a little update on our new quarters and where you stand. And I especially would, since I signed checks today for new furniture there and so forth.
Yeah. So what we're planning to do is we're getting kind of settled in there. There's a few punch list items still, but we're in there. And we're going to be having an open house probably in June. So we'll invite everyone over and we'll do a little event and catch everyone up.
Are you operating out of that office now?
Yeah, I'm going in between the two, but yes.
Anyone else over there with you?
I'm sorry?
Anyone else in the office with you?
Oh yeah, everybody's coming in. We got the whole crew.
Except Eugenia.
Eugenia is where all the money is, so it's definitely.
You're gonna have to protect it.
Exactly.
She won't open the door for me to come in and sign the checks until she looks around to make sure Jason's not there. All right. Any other questions about generally? No? All right. Someone want to make a motion to adjourn? All right, David makes a motion to adjourn. Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Good night. It was a good meeting, Brian. Thank you.
A good deal. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Take care.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Press leave.